I have reached the village. It's worse than I thought.
Perhaps I judged this place too harshly. It turns out that they have finally gotten around to getting a cell tower up here, so I do have reception. Typically, it's extremely spotty, but hey, at least it's there. I am going to write and put up these posts as and when I have the time, so don't try and measure the gaps between them to create a timeline. It won't work. Anyway, I should probably start from where I left off last time. By the time the bus was pulling into Chhayagarh, I was the only passenger left. No, some horrible monstrosity did not attack us and kill them off. They just got down at their own stops like usual. You must understand that people from the outside can and do visit our village. It's just incredibly difficult. It does not appear on any official map. No travel guides about it exist anywhere. The only symbol of the Indian government in the entire area is the police station, and it's completely staffed by local officers. I'm pretty sure the district superintendent doesn't even know it exists. If you try to catch transport from any of the major cities, no one is going to know where it is. Pretty much the only way to get here is to ask for directions in some of the neighboring villages. Some of the people there, especially the old ones, may be able to guide you to the right buses and roads. Curiously, people who have visited once never have any trouble finding their way back again, but most never do. It's a pretty boring place. If you do manage to find your way here, you'll be greeted by the same rusty iron board that I saw, scrawled over with barely legible writing in English, Hindi, and Bengali, right before the bus dumps you in front of the two naked concrete pillars that qualify as the village stop. Asterisk: dear visitors, Chhayagarh is more dangerous than it appears. Do not speak to strange people. Do not go to the forest. Do not leave your dwelling at night. If you see anything strange, inform the police station immediately. We are glad to have you as our guests. Asterisk: Chhayagarh Gram Panchayat wonderful, given that I was as much of a stranger here as the occasional German vlogger who stumbled in. Instead of driving off after fetching my suitcases from the luggage carrier. Overhead, the bus driver parked his vehicle off to the side and casually ambled over to the small tin and wood tea shop helpfully placed immediately across the road from the stop. Standing on the outskirts, I realized my predicament too late. In my rush to get here, I had forgotten to call ahead on the landline. The family had no idea I was here. Therefore, I had no transport to the manor. On top of that, it was the zenith of noon, and the sweltering road threatened to melt my shoes. Having little other choice, I slowly followed the driver to the welcoming shade of the shop. The front had been extended into a corrugated tin awning, with several wooden benches underneath forming a makeshift seating area. Here, the both of us almost unconsciously settled in next to each other. The driver raised a finger to the old man manning the shop, who quickly brought over an earthen cup brimming with milk tea and 2 cheap biscuits. And for you, Babu. It was too hot for tea, so I asked him if he had water. He did, and I ate 2 extremely dry biscuits of my own between gulps. People don't come here often, to this village. Especially not from the city. The driver's voice was level and rich, unnaturally posh for someone with his rough, everyman appearance. I paused before deciding to ignore it. There had been enough strangeness already. No, I suppose they don't. I took another sip of the water. He looked at me for a good few seconds, over the rim of his cup, and I could have sworn I saw stars dimly twinkling in them again. Tourist? Or are you some sort of salesman? Neither. Just some family business. No way he needed to know more than that. In the first place, it was odd to have to strike up a conversation with your bus driver. They were supposed to be liminal beings, taking you where you needed to go and then disappearing. This just felt wrong, like seeing your middle school teacher at the mall. I see. Family is good. One must take care of their family. The driver nodded solemnly, finishing his tea and smashing the cup on the ground. Do you smoke? No, thanks. I don't either. He glared straight into my eyes again, pupils expanding until I was looking into dark abysses. I like quick deaths. Slow ones are boring. The air turned heavy and brittle, like something was about to happen. His eyes seemed to swirl like whirlpools as I looked into them. The effect was almost hypnotizing. A strange, dull cold began to deaden the tips of my fingers, slowly radiating upward into my palms, and then my arms. My eyelids grew heavy and drowsy. All I wanted was to go to sleep, but I was startled out of my stupor by a loud clang. The shopkeeper had placed the kettle a little too roughly on the stove. When I glanced back, the driver's eyes were back to normal. He sighed and got to his feet, walking around under the shade to stretch his legs. It took a while to find my voice again. Don't you need to, go back. No. Not yet. The route timings are very spaced out. I spend a few hours here every time. He nodded at the back of the shop, where a small ramshackle shed was leaning against the wall. He lets me sleep in there sometimes. Are you a local? No, but I visit often. He looked over to where his bus was parked. Obviously. Right. I had very little interest in continuing this conversation, especially given what had just happened. Instead, I gulped down the last of the water and began looking around for a bin to throw the bottle in. The shopkeeper waved me over. Give me the bottle, Babu. He tossed it into a green plastic bag behind him. I send them for recycling with the bus every night. It's good money, though he keeps some of it. I see. Would you like some tea now? I put on a fresh kettle. Oh, no, not for me. Thanks. Then he leaned in conspiratorially and asked me the fateful question that every outsider must face in any village in India. Asterisk Kiska. Yaha se hi aap asterisk. Whose house are you from? Well, what he was really asking is how I knew people here. In other words, my family. Also, he spoke in Hindi. So, he was not a Bengali. That did not surprise me. There are plenty of people from other states here, mostly migrants in search of jobs. Ramlal, our manservant, was from Bihar, though his ancestors had moved to Chhayagarh a long time ago. Birendra Thakur, I answered, using my grandfather's formal name. As soon as he heard this, the shopkeeper, who must have been at least 20 years older than me, jumped out from behind the shop and bent to touch my feet. I recoiled instinctively, practically jumping backwards to stop him. He looked up at me, still squatting on the ground. Thakur. The little Thakur. How you have grown. It has been so long since you last came to the village. I grabbed his shoulders and practically hoisted him to his feet. Please get up, and don't touch my feet. I'm practically your son. Oh. Yeah, I should probably mention this. Like all good feudal lords, the men in our family are given two names, a personal name at birth, and a formal name at puberty. Yes, I also have one. No, I won't be revealing it. Not yet, anyway. Also, Thakur is just an honorific we use, like Lord. It's more common than you think. Rabindranath Tagore? The poet guy? Tagore is just a bastardized spelling of Thakur. After hesitating, he opted to merely fold his hands together. Thakur, I have seen you when you were a boy. You used to buy sweets from my shop whenever you visited. Maybe that was true. I barely remember my trips here. You don't need to call me that. After your grandfather passed, he touched his head in a reverent gesture. Birendra Thakur treated us like his own children. We heard about your father too. The gods have given you much grief. But the village is yours now, Thakur. Now that you are here, everything will be all right. He paused. But why are you here? You need to go to the manor. One Vakil Babu came to the village a few days ago, and I heard he was waiting for you. I nodded. Yeah, I'm just looking for a way there. Is there an auto rickshaw or something I can take? A few farmers pass by here. But you cannot travel by bullock cart, Thakur. It's unthinkable. I raised my hands to placate him. The change in demeanor was threatening to give me a whiplash injury. I'll manage. Nonsense. He turned to the back of the shop and shouted, Ramu. Ramu. Come here. A young, well-built man came jogging around the back of the building. After a brief introduction, during which he also promptly tried to fall at my feet, Ramu pulled his trusty bike out of the shed, and we set off for the house. Ramu was the shopkeeper's son, and about a year younger than me. He worked with his father in the shop, and during harvest season, he helped in the fields. Like his father, he also had a deep, totally unearned reverence for me, refusing to call me by my name even when I told it to him. Soon, we had passed the bordering fields and entered the village proper. The outermost houses were hasty constructions of thatch and mud, but as we came closer to the center, they changed into more permanent constructions of stone, bricks, and mortar. We also passed the small village clinic, the primary school, and the panchayat office, which was tightly locked up in what should have been prime working hours. Typical. I didn't realize they had started selling motorcycles in the village, Ramu. Chhayagarh really is moving forward, I started, trying to make the conversation less formal. No, Thakur. The motorcycle is not from here. I bought it in the town, about 2 years ago. You don't go to town often. No, Thakur. Too much work. Besides, people from our village seldom find the outside world attractive. You don't need to call me that, Ramu. We're the same age. The Thakur is the Thakur. Before I could say anything else, he braked abruptly, almost toppling the bike as he struggled to regain his balance. On the road, a knot of about 10 people stood facing us, blocking the way forward. They looked completely ordinary, clad in simply colored tunics and trousers, with gentle smiles on their faces. Completely normal, that is, except for the fact that they were standing entirely, unnaturally still, only staring and smiling. Dread settled in the pit of my stomach as I realized that they all had their eyes fixed directly on me. Ramu got off the bike, motioning for me to stay put as he warily put themselves between me and them. Who are you? I haven't seen you in the village before. Not a problem, one of the men said in an even tone. Still smiling gently. Why have you blocked the road? Let us through. Not a problem, the man repeated, in the exact same tone. A sense of wrongness began to itch at the back of my mind. Upon closer inspection, their expressions were perfectly frozen and still, with not the slightest hint of variation. Like a mask more than a face. Ramu must have felt it too, because he grimaced and backed away, hand moving to one of his pockets. This is fine. This time, it was a woman who said it, in the same even tone. With the exact same smile. Move aside, Ramu warned again, this is the Thakur. Make way for him. Almost as a response, they began to move, practically gliding as they closed the distance between us in a fly. So good to see you again, one of the men said, as they all raised their hands in unison, preparing to tackle Ramu. Moving quicker than I could have anticipated, Ramu pulled a switchblade out of his pocket, snapping it open as he stabbed the first one in the belly. Instead of blood, fine ash poured out of the wound. Not a problem, the man repeated, even as the wound grew, and he crumbled to ash in a matter of seconds. But then, the rest were upon him. Thakur, run. Ramu kicked one of the creatures, hurling her backwards. 2 others tried to grab at his arm and take away the knife, but he swatted them away. Run. The manor is that way. Not far now. Run. To its credit, my body moved before my mind could even comprehend what was happening. I swung my leg off the bike and began to move. However, the creatures, whatever they were still blocking the road. Around them, then. I ducked into one of the alleys, intending to go between the buildings and sidestep them entirely. But this was exactly what they had been waiting for. As I ran, a smiling woman turned the corner and grabbed my shoulders. Despite my momentum, I stopped dead in my tracks. You're a good man, she said, before pushing me with one hand. My feet left the ground, and I landed on my back, sliding all the way out of the alley and back onto the main road. My head spun from the blow of the fall, my vision threatening to split into multiples. They had caught Ramu. His knife had been knocked out of his hands, landing somewhat close to me. He was now prone on the ground, 2 of the smiling men holding his arms down. His legs were free for some time, kicking wildly at the creatures surrounding him, but they soon managed to pin him down completely. The woman from earlier slowly knelt over him, straddling him as he struggled and cursed. This is fine, she repeated, leaning down until her face was exactly aligned with his. Then, her features began to melt. Like cheap paint. Everything on her face, her eyes, lips, nose, lashes, all began to bleed and blend into each other. The concoction rotated in lazy circles, slowly bleaching until the entirety of her face had become a gray, ashy spiral, akin to a cyclone or a whirlpool. This is fine. The voice echoed from the depths of the spiraling ash, muffled and dreamy. Ramu stopped struggling, his eyes widening as the reality of the danger set in. Then she leaned in again, and he began to scream. The woman's face spun faster, almost greedily, as Ramu's face began to dissolve into particles. Blood emerged, pooled, and ran in rivulets down the side of his head as the skin was disintegrated, cracked, and peeled off, disappearing into the gaping maw. His eyes wrinkled and then burst, the fluid within similarly swallowed. His limbs thrashed wildly, the freshly lipless mouth screaming in impotent terror, but the grip of his captors would not yield. Looking back now, the whole thing probably lasted about 10 seconds at best. But as I lay there, dazed, my hands unwilling to rise and cover my eyes, my gut unable to vomit at the sight, those seconds stretched into hours. Too late, I realized that I knew all the smiling faces surrounding us. The English teacher from middle school I had a crush on. The friendly local grocer from my neighborhood in Kolkata. The serious constable who sat outside the Calcutta High Court on Wednesdays. That one girl in college I tried to flirt with and failed miserably. These things were never people at all. They were simply pretending, and they were pretending to be people I knew. Like an anglerfish and its light. I should have seen it before. Ramu's struggles stopped, the final signs of life ebbing from him alongside the last few particles of his face. The skinless, bloody mess of muscle and fat left behind made my skin crawl, but I barely had time to process it as the woman's face slowly returned to normal human features. But though the body remained female, the face was now Ramu's. Except he was no longer screaming. The same serene smile had been painted onto his mouth. "Run, Thakur. Run, Thakur," he chanted, in that same even tone. A movement at my feet caught my eye. The creature that had pushed me was now bending over me, her face dissolving into the same spiral. "You're a good man." How typical, that the monsters would pick the one girl I fumbled to steal my face. However, the humor was lost on me in the moment. Instead, I forced my limbs to work, reaching up to push her away. She casually grabbed my arm with unnatural strength, pinning it to the road as her spiraling face loomed over mine. The others slowly rose, leaving Ramu's lifeless corpse behind as they surrounded me in a loose circle. The thin smiles remained affixed on their faces as they watched my impending death. I desperately scrabbled for purchase, turning my head away from her. But she used her other hand to grab my chin, almost lovingly turning my face to meet hers as she leaned in. Closer and closer. I could not stop the tremors from running through my limbs, but otherwise, everything important refused to move. Like a deer dazed by headlights, I had found my doom, and I could do nothing to even slow it. The edges of my face erupted in pain as the skin pulled and snapped, folding in on itself. My fingers found something hard and well-shaped. The knife. The entities had not noticed, too focused on my face. I scratched desperately, nails catching in the most minute grooves on the handle as I pulled it into my grip. My nose began to be flayed, the skin reaching up to be sucked into the spiral. I turned the knife inwards and stabbed it into her wrist. An unearthly shriek emanated from the churning whirlpool, and she jerked backwards, snatching her hand away. Taking the opening, before I could know what I was doing, I reached up and dragged the knife across her throat. The blade was incredibly sharp. Almost scalpel-like as it tore straight through her skin and flesh, opening an ashy torrent that cascaded down her chest and onto mine. The creature raised her hands, trying to stem the flow, but it was only a second or two before she collapsed. Completely, crumbling into nothingness. For a moment, everything was still. Then, all the remaining ones surged forward. I slashed the knife blindly through the air, freed of my paralysis by sheer adrenaline as I kicked away from them. Anything to put a little distance. Make the smallest opening. The bike was close, the engine still running. Maybe I could get away. Two of them grabbed my feet and heaved, effortlessly pulling me into the knot. The next moment, I was set upon by a torrent of hands, pinning my limbs. The knife was slapped out of my hands. Bad boy, my English teacher murmured, her face already beginning to twist as she approached me. An identity is a heck of a thing to take from someone, you know. Especially for free. They all froze, head snapping unnaturally to stare at the source of the familiar posh voice behind me. Their grip slackened, allowing me to turn slightly to see the bus driver casually sipping another cup of tea, the other hand in his pocket. I am not very fond of thieves. He looked right at me. All right, kid. Your face looks a little stretchy, but I think you will live. I looked back at the creatures. For the first time, they were not smiling. Their faces were stuck in the exact same grimace, eyes glowering with anger. Interloper. Devil. Exile. Do not interfere. They spoke in unison, the tone harsh and rough. Do not interfere. Sorry, guys. Needs must. He poured the tea out on the ground, making 3 straight lines. He cannot die yet. The air has not been produced. Interloper, they screamed. Die. 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 If you insist. He crushed the cup in his hand and tossed the fragments into the air. The 3 lines of tea on the road glowed and then detonated in a blinding blast, searing my retinas. I screwed my eyes shut until the afterimage of the explosion faded from the inside of my eyelids. When I opened them again, the man was standing over me. He offered me his hand. They were right. You truly are an amateur. I accepted his help, unsteadily rising. Who are you? I drive the bus. We have met before, have we not? This linear time is rather confusing. What? No. Who are you? Really? Now that is a good question. He tapped his nose. There was no answer to follow. What were those things? I panted as the memory of Ramu's face peeling off came rushing back. I deliberately turned my back to the body. Opportunists. Your grandfather left a vacuum, and they intended to fill it. They will not be the only ones. You need to take charge of affairs. Quickly. He pointed down the road. Manor is not far. But avoid the road. They will be watching. Won't you? Help you? Escort you? Babysit you? He let out a harsh but melodious laugh. I have already done too much, helping you like this. Any more, and there will be consequences. I frowned. Consequences? You can stay here for some time. I have made the place safe. Temporarily. But you must get moving soon. He waved lazily and turned, walking away. If you need something from town, let me know. No extra charge for the boss. Wait. I called out, despite the sense of unease, what did you mean? About the air? What are you planning? The same thing everyone has been telling you already. He turned his head one last time, and I saw the stars glitter in the inky darkness of his eyes. There has always been a Thakur. There must always be a Thakur. Then, the darkness bloomed from his eyes, enveloping my vision entirely for an instant. When it snapped out of existence, he was gone. I am typing this out on the road, right next to Ramu's faceless corpse, but I'll probably only get to post it after I actually get to the house. I'm still trying not to look at the body. No villager has arrived on the scene yet. They must all be busy in the fields or at work. The bus driver. I suppose I cannot call him that any longer. The man with the starry eyes? Too long. Anyway. He said this place would be safe for some time, but that provides little comfort now to my shaking hands. I have made an astounding number of spelling mistakes already. Every time I look away from the screen, I see that ashy, gray spiral, burned into my vision. Just what the hell have I gotten myself into?